Poll, which has grossed about $50 million, tells the story of a young sheriff in rural Tennessee and his violent fight against the local underworld. The real-life hero was Buford PUSSER, whose wife was killed by racketeers and who himself was the target of 7 assassination attempts. Buford PUSSER, the father of 3, was killed last night in a highway crash at the age of 36. More on the story from David Dick in Selmer, Tennessee.
One day before he died, Buford PUSSER held a news conference to announce he'd signed a $2 million contract to make a sequel to the movie about his life, Walking Tall.
Well, big fight, I'm scared. But I feel somewhat confident about it now after taking screen tests.
Shortly after midnight, Buford PUSSER was heading home down this road, Highway 64. He was alone in the car. Today, there were long skid marks on the road, and the curious, many of them old friends of PUSSER, gathered to look at the place where his car hit the embankment, flipped over, and burned. PUSSER was thrown out and killed. Souvenir hunters picked up whatever they could find, like pieces of the windshield. The car was towed to a nearby service station where PUSSER's close friend, Roger Horton, looking at the car's broken tie rod, said he had doubts that it was just an accident.
To me, like it's been cut. Looks like to me like it's been damaged. I don't believe it happened in a wreck or it hit sideways. And if it had, it don't look like it would have bothered this.
Tennessee State Police investigating the wreck say they believe the tie rod was broken on impact, but that the case is not closed. The investigation is continuing. David Dick, CBS News, Selmer, Tennessee.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Buford PUSSER, The Other Story. And tonight we're discussing Buford's fatal accident. And with me is Steve Cromwell. Now, Steve happened to have wandered upon the accident just shortly after it happened. So we're going to let him tell us about that. How are you, Steve?
Good. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing quite well. I appreciate you being here.
Glad to be here.
So I'll tell you what, I'm just going to let you tell your story about what happened that night.
Well, it was in 1974. It was August 20th, and it was a little before midnight. Me and one of my best friends, Bobby Phillips, we're 17 years old. We just had graduated high school a few months before this. We were out at night. I live in Savannah, which is next door to Adamsville, about 12 minutes from Adamsville.
Yeah.
We were just out riding, killing time, didn't want to go home, you know. And so we rode over through Adamsville, and right as you get outside Adamsville, about 4 miles, I noticed in the distance I could see a blue light, and then looked like some type of little fire burning, and some cars with some flashers going. So when we pulled up there, we got out, and the car, you couldn't tell what kind of car it was. We were too far from it, but you could tell it was a wreck because there was dirt, gravel, and big car pieces laying all out in the highway. At that time, Highway 64 was just a 2-lane highway, and the road ditch and all was just right there close. And so we started walking up beside the ditch, between the road and the ditch, and I said, "Bobby, watch it." Something caught my eye in the ditch, something white, and I looked, and it was a body, a person laying in the ditch, nobody around, roughly about 100 feet from where the car was that was burning. And we walked a little further, and then I heard a young girl's voice screaming and crying. My daddy's dead. My daddy's dead. Just terrible, you know, agony sounding, screaming and crying, and they were trying to get her put in a car on the other side of the road across from the wreck. And so we walked on up, and the car was beginning to burn bigger, and there was some people. There was just a few people there, and of course it was midnight. It was dark, and there was the law enforcement officer that was there. I'm pretty sure it was a Adamsville Police Department car that was there, with the law car, and he was talking to some people, and the car started burning bigger. Then just started burning bigger and bigger, and got on fire on the inside. Well, all of a sudden I started hearing gunfire, and bullets were ricocheting off the road and whizzing through the air. So everybody scattered, and I jumped down beside that Adamsville police car, and the officer, he jumped down there too, and he said, get up in behind the wheel so the bullets won't hit your feet and legs. And I did that, and he did the same on the other wheel. And he said, there's no telling how much ammunition and guns are in that car. I said, so it's not somebody shooting at us? He said, no, it's coming out of that car. And he said, you know whose car that is? I said, no, sir. He said, that's Buford PUSSER, Sheriff Buford PUSSER's car. And that's him laying up there in that ditch. We're pretty sure he's dead. And I couldn't believe it, you know, because he was like a legend around our part of the country, and the movie had come out, and he had gotten famous. It was just, I couldn't comprehend that. Everybody thought he was bulletproof. And we had to stay there for, you know how time is. And when something like that happens, I'm sure it was 10 or 15 minutes anyway. And the car just was burning huge. And I think along about that time's when the state trooper pulled up, and also the ambulance got there about that time, because one of the officers made the ambulance stay back, afraid that the car was burning too big. I never did see a fire truck. I don't know what happened on that, but the car then started going. It burnt big for a few minutes, and then it started going down because that fiberglass, most of it had been broken off in the wreck, so there wasn't a whole lot left there to burn. And when it started dying down, we all got up. The bullets had stopped flying, and he motioned for the ambulance to come on up, and we walked up there to Buford's body, and the police and ambulance personnel, they held flashlights and shined on him, and he had on white short pants, white shoes, and a slip-on striped shirt that had white and some color striped crossways. And they, I guess it was the medical examiner. He bent down there, and I remember Buford had a little nose, a little blood had run out of his nose, and he had a cut on his leg, and some blood had come out of it. Other than that, he looked fine. Looked like he could have got up and walked away. And they reached up and felt of his neck, trying to find a pulse. And then one of them had a stethoscope, and they put it on their ears. And when they raised his shirt up, I saw healed scars from some type of wounds on there, and they put around trying to find his heartbeat and couldn't, and he just raised his head up and shook his head no. And of course, everybody knew for sure he was gone then. And so they loaded him up on the ambulance, and then the police asked if we would help clean the road up. So I kicked big pieces of fiberglass fender that car. It was a 74 Corvette. It was a maroon color. And I'd seen it lots of times in Savannah and around before that. And we kicked big pieces of it out of the road and helped clear the road so the traffic could start going again, because by then the car was just pretty much just smoke, and the fire had almost gone out. So we left right after the ambulance did. We didn't stay till the wrecker came. I never did see a fire truck. And I went home that night. It was probably close to 2 o'clock by the time I got home in the morning. And it was dark when I drove up in our yard. As soon as I opened the door and got out, I saw his body laying there. And man, it was a flashback, you know. And I went in the house, and I'd shut my eyes, and I'd see him laying there in that ditch. And I had nightmares for weeks after that. It messed me up. And the next morning, Bobby, I went and picked him up. I said, let's go back and look at the wreck site. And we got there, and there were people there scooping ashes up in containers where that car had burnt for souvenirs. And I said, man, I don't want no souvenir for that. I ain't no way I want something to remind me of it. And we looked at the black marks. I've never seen black marks that long, except for like in a NASCAR race, the skid marks. We walked down the highway and saw where he left the road. And they talked about, I've seen different videos where they talk about he went over a thrill hill. It was a straight stretch. There wasn't a hill. There wasn't a curve. There was no reason for him to run out of that road there where he did.
Let me ask you there, when you say running off the road, did the skid marks indicate that he went off the right side and then came back across the highway? Do you recall?
Coming like from Selmer and headed toward Adamsville, which he had been heading east. And you could see where he left the road on the right side, the passenger side. He left the road, and when he came back up on the road, he was turned completely sideways. All 4 wheels were locked, and you could see the pattern in where it looked like he was fighting the wheel,
right?
Because marks were different. And he slid, I think it was like 500 feet sideways. And he hit that parking lot up there in front of that service station, and it was gravel, and it was like another 200 feet. I think altogether it was like 500 feet when he hit the bank. And the guy that lived down the road, he heard him come by, and he was at the wreck. And I heard him tell somebody, he said, it sounded like a jet airplane went by my house. He said, I was sitting there watching TV, and I heard the boom, and he got out and got in his car and went up there and found him. I think the first one that found him.
Yeah,
But
I
he said,
understand that he went up there and saw the car, and that there was just a small flame under the hood, and he went back to his home and called authorities, and then went back down to the site. And Buford was laying right behind the car at that time, and the car was almost back out to the highway at that point from where it had hit the embankment and flipped. But the car was upright.
it was on its wheels. It was facing north. And he said that Buford was laying about 3 feet behind the car when he got there.
Yeah.
But there's no telling how fast he was going to leave black marks that long, and to hit that bank as hard as it hit, even after sliding that far, because it demolished that car. It broke the body all to pieces, and you can see the steel reinforcement in the driver's side door. It was bowed out.
Yeah, bowed out.
See that in the museum. You can see the bowed out door in the car where he hit it with such force when he hit that bank. But
it's a bad deal. He'd been to Memphis that day and signed a contract to play himself in the second movie, and I think his movie deal for that was $2 million that he would be paid for the playing himself. So I don't know what their contract was like, if the family recouped any funds from that, or the deal just absolutely went away. But there were several reports from the time that he was at the fair that night that different ones smelled alcohol on his breath. And of course, Paul Irvin would tell me that, they had a breathalyzer done. A McNairy County deputy confirmed that, said he was there when Dr. Peeler drew the blood, and that he came back as a 0.18. But yet, for some reason, they kept having Trooper Irvin, rewrite his report and telling him it, wasn't right yet. And he kept changing it. And I think he said he changed it 6 times after the writing it out initially. And he couldn't figure out what he was putting in there that was wrong, that finally decided he'd take that 0.18 BAC out of the report. And then they accepted it. So I guess you can only assume that they didn't want people to know that Buford actually died as a drunk driver.
What it sounds like.
Which is the whole deal is just sad. I always felt sorry for Dewana, because she lost her mom when she was about 6, and then here when she's about 12 or 13, she loses her dad, and that had to be really tough for her.
Well, I became friends with Dewana about probably 20 years after that wreck in the late 90s, and she talked about it. She said she always believed that it wasn't just an accident. It's what she truly believed, that there was more to it, because she said, I know how good my daddy could drive, and he wouldn't have just wrecked for no reason. And of course, she thought he hung the moon.
Sure. But in factuality, I mean, Buford had wrecked just about every car he ever owned. I mean, he was in several accidents.
They said he drove wide open about everywhere he went. So
yeah, they also attributed to the ambush the scars on his face, and if you look on the left side of his face, he had a big injury right there, and that was actually from an auto accident. It had nothing to do with the ambush, and I guess he turned the car upside down, crushed his orbital eye socket, and, had to have several surgeries to correct that. But yeah, like with any legend, I guess it just sounded good to say, well, he had 16 surgeries and, to correct the problems from the ambush, but that included that eye that he damaged in an auto wreck.
Yeah, even after all those surgeries, his face still was sort of pulled down on that side. You
Yeah,
could tell a lot of damage done there over the years.
yeah. Just really not a good thing. I mean, here you had somebody who thought, like you said, was bulletproof, a living legend, and to go that way at a high point in his life is just sad, and especially
Yeah,
for Luana. Something I'd like to touch on also is, that they, uh, like you were saying, Dewana believed that there was more to his death than just the car wreck. But I've interviewed several people. I know the state investigated it. I know they sent parts off to the FBI to have those evaluated. Um, Helen Pusser had her own GM experts that she paid to inspect the car and the parts, and every one of them came back and said there were no signs of sabotage. That you know there just wasn't anything. And I'm sure that, like I say, Dewana was really young. You felt sorry for her, and everybody around her, I'm sure, was telling her what a hero her dad was and everything that he had been through. And I assume that she just wanted to believe that somebody had finally got to Buford and that there was somebody behind all that. But yet you have to wonder, the last big thing that happened, uh, other than the Russ Hamilton shooting, which was totally unrelated to the state line. The last thing that happened was in 1967. Here it is, 1974. Why would anybody be wanting to take Buford out at that point in time?
right.
That that just never made sense to me.
No, it never made sense really.
Um, Now you got to see Buford a couple of times before that he was killed. I understand.
I did. Yeah, well, of course, I'd always heard about him, uh, all the wrecks and the ambush and been shot and beat up, no telling how many men, baddest guy around, and uh, just all the injuries he had and how big he was. Well, after the movie came out, uh, in Savannah, we still do have a Piggly Wiggly grocery store, and they were going to have a Buford to come out in the parking lot on a Saturday and sign autographs. And so I was 16 at that time. That was in '73, and so I had to go. I'd never seen him in person before, uh, so I went there. When I got there was a pretty good crowd already there. He wasn't there yet, and people started coming in. I don't know how many was there, 40 or 50, so I guess. And he drove up. We saw a big car drive up, big nice car, and he got out, and he was a big man. He was tall. He was a head taller than anybody else there. Came walking up there, and he was not fat. He was just big, muscular, and had long legs. He was a big man and scary looking to me. And he walked up there, and as he started walking up to where everybody was standing, everybody normally, when a famous person comes into a crowd, everybody wants to gather around, and get close to him. Well, this went the other way. He started walking toward the crowd, and everybody started backing up. And the closer you get the further they back, everybody was afraid of him.
He was an imposing figure.
I was one of them backing up too, because I'd never seen a guy like that, you know, with that reputation. So everybody just backed like 10, 20 feet away, and he was standing there. He crossed his arms and he was nodding at people, and I was beginning to feel sorry for him, because you could tell he hadn't done much of that before. You know, that was right after the movie came out. And finally, this old floozy woman, she came up there and started talking to him, and he signed the autograph, and then people just started easing up then after she kind of broke the ice, and everybody started, you know, he started talking and things started going okay then.
Yeah.
But it was an odd moment there for a little while.
Now, I understand that you also saw him at the Pusser Festival, where he was officiating a wrestling match.
And later that year, in October, that same year, 73, they were going to have the first Buford PUSSER Day in Adamsville. And they were going to have politicians there and law enforcement officers, and they were going to have a wrestling match, and he was going to be the referee. And they were going to be selling souvenirs, the sticks, the walking tall sticks. And so me and my buddies, we had to go. And we went and we drove up. It was at the Adamsville City Park. And they had a big tent set up out there, kind of like a circus tent, not as big as a circus tent, but it was a big tent. And a lot of people there, a lot of people. And they inside the tent, they had a real wrestling ring set up just like you see on TV, and chairs all around. And of course, the local authorities, they had to do a little speaking and all this, and had a little program type deal there. And after that, here comes out Buford. He's got on a referee outfit, black pants and a black and white striped shirt, you know, wrestlers, referee. And then here come two old grizzly looking wrestlers out there, pretty good sized old mean looking men. And they got up there in the ring. He told them the rules and all, and they rang the bell and they started wrestling. Of course, they were knocking each other around and flipping and falling and sticking their legs under the rope, and Buford was breaking them up. And, oh, it was going good. You know, it's pretty good entertainment. And then after a while, finally one of them got one of them pinned down. Well, Buford jumped down there and he started counting. And before he got to 3, that guy broke loose. Well, that other old guy, he got mad. And he reared back like he was going to hit Buford. And Buford picked that big guy up and threw him over the top rope out on the floor. And of course, everybody just yelled and cheered. They thought that was the biggest thing there was. But it showed how strong he was.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt that he was a powerful individual.
He was. And this was, you know, he was like about 35 or 6 years old then, I guess. And he was a big, stout fella.
Huh.
About it.
Well,
yeah.
You know, that's hometown entertainment at its best.
They were selling those big sticks, and we all had to buy one. He had them autographed, you know, and all that. And I don't know what happened to it after a few years. It disappeared. I wish I still had it, but I just don't. But they sold a lot of them that day, I can tell you that.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
I guess that's the first I sold any of them, because that was the beginning of the Buford PUSSER. I think after his death, which he died the very next year after that, and I don't think they had another one of those festivals till like 1987. There was a pretty long span there where they didn't have. I think maybe when they turned his house into a museum, and they tied that into the festival and all some way, I believe is how that worked.
Yeah. Well, all that is really interesting. I know. Now, for those who are wondering, Steve and I met on this meet and greet that we had back in May, which we're going to do again on October 19th of this year. Are you going to try and make it, Steve?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I never did know exactly the route he took the night of the ambush, and when we took that route, I really enjoyed being able to know all the crooks and turns and back roads he took.
Makes you wonder why he did that, why he went that way.
I don't, it didn't make any sense, to me, the roads that we went on. But I enjoyed that part of it for sure, and meeting a lot of the people that were like me, interested in a lot of it.
Oh yeah, I've visited with a lot of those people for years and have never met most of them. And I just felt like it was time to do something where we could all get together, meet, visit all these places. And if anyone's wondering, when we do it again on October 19th, the only charge there is for this is if when we get into Adamsville, we like to go to the museum. Now, the museum does have a admission fee. That's the only charge, and that money goes to the museum. And believe it or not, as much as people think I hate Buford Pusser, I don't. As a matter of fact, I support the museum. I hope that it never closes. So, if I can, I like to bring a little business their way. But at any rate, Steve, I really hope to see you then. And my screen tells me that we are running out of time. So I'll look to see you then. I hope everybody can make it. You can, if you plan on attending, I would encourage you to go to my YouTube page, my Facebook page, Buford Pusser, The Other Story, and let us know if you'll be attending and how many will be in your party. Now, other than that, that's about it. Steve, I appreciate you being on here today.
I've enjoyed it, Mike. I appreciate you having me on.
And I look forward to seeing you in October.
Look forward to it.
All right now. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.